Irian Kodra walked into Liverpool like a ghost. No noise, no warning, just quiet control. Within months, the ruthless Albanian mastermind had turned a city once ruled by chaotic street gangs into his own empire of fear and money. Across the docks, Liam Burke, the fading king of Liverpool's old underworld, watched his power crumble as his men disappeared one by one. What began as a silent takeover soon spiraled into a brutal war, a war of blood, betrayal, and business that would expose how far Britain's criminal world had already fallen under foreign control. Please subscribe for daily new update of gang crime story and watch till end. In the early 2000s, Liverpool's underworld thrived on chaos, built on decades of gang rivalries and unspoken rules. Local gangs had long divided the city into territories, each controlling its own network of dealers, smugglers, and enforcers. The money flowed steadily, and the docks served as the artery of their operations. Into this volatile system entered a new, silent force, a group of Albanians who arrived without noise or spectacle, yet with a level of organization that soon disrupted everything. Their leader, Irian Kodra, was unlike the loud, impulsive figures who dominated Liverpool's streets. He was calm, methodical, and highly intelligent, preferring business meetings over brawl. Irian had built connections across Europe, giving him access to steady supplies of narcotics, weapons, and cash. His men were disciplined, moving with quiet precision that drew little attention from both rivals and law enforcement. At first, their presence seemed harmless. They purchased small properties around Liverpool, a car wash here, a small cafe there, a used car lot near the docks. These businesses became covers for a much larger operation. Through them, shipments began arriving disguised as imports of machinery and textiles. Each delivery carried something extra hidden deep inside: cocaine, heroin, or weapons. The Albanians blended legitimate trade with crime so effectively that even customs officials overlooked their movements. By the time the local gangs noticed what was happening, Irian's network had already secured control of several key supply chains. For decades, Liverpool's gangs had relied on informal deals with continental smugglers, often facing unpredictable prices and unreliable shipments. Irian changed that by offering consistency and professionalism. His organization operated like a corporation, with strict hierarchies, financial planning, and designated managers. He introduced a level of discipline that shocked even his competitors. Many of the city's smaller dealers, tempted by stable supplies and better profits, quietly shifted allegiance. This was not conquest through violence. It was economic takeover executed with surgical precision. As months passed, the balance of power began to shift. The local gangs, particularly those under leaders like Liam Burke, saw their profits decline. Their usual suppliers dried up as the Albanians bought loyalty across the ports. Yet no one could clearly trace the change back to Irian. He stayed invisible, communicating only through trusted intermediaries. His strategy was to build control without drawing attention, ensuring that even when police operations targeted local gangs, his network remained untouched. It was a slow, methodical invasion, the kind that replaced chaos with cold order. The Albanians offered protection, money laundering routes, and stable drug prices. Some local leaders joined them voluntarily, while others resisted, unaware that their resistance was already doomed. The city's criminal ecosystem was transforming from within. By the end of that year, Irian Kodra controlled nearly half of Liverpool's illicit imports. The streets still looked the same pubs, the same fights, the same faces. But behind the scenes, every deal, every delivery, and every profit now ran through one name few dared to mention aloud. The silent invasion was complete, and Liverpool would never be the same again. The first real confrontation between the Albanian network and Liverpool's old gangs began at the docks, the city's beating heart of crime and commerce. It was here that millions of pounds worth of drugs and contraband entered Britain under the cover of night. For decades, local crews had ruled those waters, paying off port workers, customs officers, and even night patrols. But that control began slipping when a major cocaine shipment bound for Liam Burke's crew mysteriously vanished. It was meant to be his biggest score in years, a haul that could have restored his fading power. Instead, the container never reached his men. Within hours, whispers spread through the underworld that Arian Kodra's people had intercepted it. They had bribed the right dock managers, replaced security teams, and sealed every access point before Liam even realized what was happening. The message was subtle but deadly clear: the Albanians now owned the dock. Liam had spent years building his reputation through fear and loyalty, but those things meant little against money and precision. Still, he wasn't ready to surrender. His pride demanded a response. After gathering what was left of his trusted men, he planned a strike. They targeted a small Albanian stash house near Bootle, a modest warehouse rumored to hold drugs worth hundreds of thousands. The attack was brutal but short. Liam's crew stormed the place, setting it ablaze and escaping before the police could arrive. For the first time in months, he felt victorious. But that feeling lasted less than 2 days. 48 hours later, 2 of his top men were found dead inside a burned-out van abandoned on the outskirts of Whirl. Their bodies were barely recognizable, the scene staged as a warning. Word spread quickly across Liverpool's underworld. Arian Kodra had responded. No one had seen him or his men act, yet everyone knew who was behind it. The retaliation was cold, efficient, and terrifyingly professional. It wasn't just revenge. It was control through fear. In the weeks that followed, small dealers started disappearing. Some were found dead, others simply vanished without trace. Those who remained alive began switching sides, preferring the calm brutality of the Albanians to the chaos of Liverpool's locals. Arian's men didn't brag, didn't threaten, they simply moved in and took over, replacing old loyalties with silent obedience. Even Liam's longtime allies began avoiding his calls, afraid that association with him would draw unwanted attention. For the police, the sudden surge in violence looked like another gang feud. But investigators soon realized something different was happening. The killings were too clean, too targeted, and too disciplined. There were no random shootouts, no messy scenes, just calculated hits. The Albanians weren't fighting for territory. They were eliminating instability. As the months passed, Liam's influence crumbled. The docks, once the symbol of his power, were now completely under Albanian control. Arian's organization ran operations like a business empire, contracts, shipments, accounting, all hidden under legal trade fronts. For Liverpool's gangs, the era of street wars was ending. The new war was quieter, more sophisticated, and deadlier. Liam Burke had lost his kingdom, and the city had unknowingly crowned a new ruler who operated from the shadows, running everything without firing a single shot himself. As the bloodshed at the docks began to fade from the headlines, another kind of battle emerged. One fought not with guns, but with money. Arian Kodra understood that true power didn't come from fear alone. It came from control of cash flow. To solidify his empire, he needed clean channels to move dirty money, and for that he brought in Arban Duka, a quiet, meticulous accountant from Tirana, who had once worked for European import firms before turning to organized crime. Arban's genius wasn't in violence, it was in invisibility. Within months, he built a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and construction fronts across Merseyside. Every pound that passed through the Albanian network was washed and reappeared as legitimate business income. Car washes, property developments, casinos, and even charity events became tools in the machine. Liverpool's economy began unknowingly feeding the empire that had quietly conquered it. For the local gangs, this new order created a crisis. Their cash-heavy operations drew police scrutiny, while Arian's businesses stayed spotless on paper. The Albanian system allowed them to reinvest profits into real estate, buying up cheap properties in rundown areas and turning them into valuable assets. Soon their influence wasn't just on the streets, it was in boardrooms and legal offices. Local leaders who once strutted through clubs with stacks of cash now found themselves broke, sidelined, and irrelevant. Liam Burke, hiding from Arian's men, could only watch as his former kingdom turned corporate. But Irian's rise came with growing internal tension. His rapid expansion meant managing loyalty became harder. Arban warned him that too much growth, too quickly, could expose them. Yet Irian's hunger for dominance overrode caution. He began pushing into new territories, Manchester, Birmingham, even parts of London. To keep control, he rewarded loyalty with wealth and punished betrayal with disappearance. His men were well paid, disciplined, and feared. They followed a single rule: never let the organization's name appear in any file or arrest record. Meanwhile, a betrayal was brewing within the Liverpool side. Connor Rees, once Liam Burke's most trusted lieutenant, had secretly aligned himself with Irian. He saw where the power was shifting and wanted a piece of it. Using his knowledge of Liverpool's suppliers and stash houses, he began feeding Irian crucial information: routes, codes, safe houses, and the identities of trusted couriers. With every detail he shared, Irian tightened his grip on the city. Within weeks, the Albanians dismantled the last remnants of Liam's supply lines. Entire operations that had taken years to build vanished overnight. When Connor's betrayal became known among the old Liverpool circles, it was too late. Liam's surviving men tried to retaliate, but their networks were already infiltrated. Irian rewarded Connor handsomely, but as always, he never trusted anyone completely. A few months later, Honor disappeared without explanation. Rumor had it he'd been relocated abroad under a new name, but those closer to the truth whispered that Irian had tied up the loose end himself. By the end of that year, the money war was over. The Albanians had transformed Liverpool's crime scene into a system of efficiency. Every illegal pound was washed, reinvested, and multiplied. Local gangs no longer fought for control. They worked for it, often without even realizing who truly owned the businesses they were serving. The city's streets looked calm, but beneath the surface, every deal, every transaction, every coin traced back to the man who ruled Liverpool's economy from the shadows, Irian Kodra, the silent architect of Britain's new criminal order. By 2012, Liverpool's streets had become tense and unpredictable, simmering with violence that never quite made the evening news. The balance of power had shifted entirely toward the Albanians, but not everyone accepted that change. Pockets of resistance still existed. Old loyalists of Liam Burke's defunct crew, small independent dealers, and local enforcers who refused to bow to Irian Kodra's authority. They called themselves defenders of the old ways, but in truth, they were remnants of a dying breed. The Albanians had turned the city's underworld into a business empire, while the locals still played by the rules of the past. That difference would soon spill into one of the bloodiest years Liverpool had seen in decades. The first strike came quietly. A local street dealer with links to Burke's old gang was found dead behind a pub in Dingle, execution style. A single bullet to the head. No money was taken, no drugs stolen. It was a message. Within weeks, more bodies followed. Men who had refused to pay debts, rivals who questioned Albanian control, and even low-level associates who whispered about rebellion. The killings were clean, precise, and terrifyingly efficient. There were no messy shootouts, no random chaos, just professional extermination. The police grew overwhelmed as the number of homicides climbed, each crime scene more mysterious than the last. The violence reached its peak one humid summer night, when a drive-by shooting tore through a crowded Toxteth street. 5 people were killed, 2 of them innocent bystanders. The media called it gang warfare, but insiders knew it was a statement from Irian's new enforcer, Nikol Rami, a man imported from Albania with a reputation for cold brutality. Nikol was different from the local muscle. He didn't crave fame, didn't drink, didn't party. He lived in silence, surrounded by discipline and fear. Every killing he ordered was strategic, designed to erase instability and enforce obedience. His methods created an atmosphere where even the boldest criminals refused to speak Irian's name aloud. While the streets drowned in blood, the police launched Operation Northern Line, a large-scale investigation targeting both the Albanians and the remaining Liverpool factions. Dozens of arrests were made, but it achieved little. The foot soldiers fell while the mastermind stayed untouched. Irian's name never appeared in any report. His lieutenants used encrypted phones, offshore accounts and fake passports, making it impossible for authorities to connect the dots. The operation ended quietly, celebrated publicly as a victory, even though it barely scratched the surface. In the middle of this chaos, Liam Burke resurfaced, thought to be dead or in hiding abroad. He had been moving between safe houses, gathering a handful of surviving allies. Desperate to reclaim some dignity, he planned one final act, a direct strike against the Albanians' core. He targeted a nightclub near the city center, rumored to be Irian's base of operations. The plan was bold but doomed. Someone within his circle betrayed him before the attack even began. At dawn, a convoy of masked men raided his hideout. The assault was swift and silent. When police arrived hours later, the scene was carnage. Liam and every one of his men were dead. No arrests were made, and no witnesses came forward. Liverpool awoke the next morning to headlines of another gang massacre. But those who lived within the underworld knew the truth. The last challenge to Irian Kodra's empire had been crushed completely. From that night onward, no one dared to speak of rebellion. The streets that had once echoed with gunfire fell into an eerie calm, a silence not born of peace, but of total control. After years of relentless violence, bloodshed, and silent disappearances, something unexpected happened in Liverpool's underworld. The killings slowed. The city, once scarred by constant retaliation and fear, began to breathe again. The streets that had echoed with gunfire now fell quiet. Not because justice had prevailed, but because money had. The chaos was bad for business, and even criminals knew when to change strategy. It was during this fragile lull that Declan Hayes emerged. A former fixer known for settling disputes between rival crews. He had no loyalty to any side, his only allegiance was profit. Seeing opportunity in the city's exhaustion, Declan began negotiating what would later be called the Blood Pact, an agreement that would end open warfare between the Albanians and the surviving Liverpool faction. The idea of peace seemed impossible at first. Too much blood had been spilled, too many families destroyed. Yet Declan convinced both sides that cooperation was more profitable than conflict. Irian Kodra understood the logic immediately. His empire had grown vast but vulnerable, constantly attracting police attention. A truce would allow him to operate quietly again, rebuilding his financial channels without interruption. On the other side, the remnants of the local gangs were weak, fractured, and broke. Years of war had left them with nothing but fear. Declan offered them survival, a chance to earn again, even if it meant working under Albanian supervision. The deal was struck in secrecy. Over a single night in a dimly lit warehouse on the edge of the Mersey River, representatives from both sides met under Declan's watch. No police, no outsiders, no records. The agreement divided Liverpool into zones. The Albanians would control the import and wholesale supply of drugs and weapons, while the local gangs would handle street-level distribution. Profits would be shared, conflicts avoided, and no territory would change hands without mutual consent. It was a pact built not on trust, but on greed and exhaustion. Everyone involved knew it could collapse at any moment, yet everyone also knew breaking it would mean certain death. Within weeks, the difference was visible. Shootings stopped, the number of disappearances dropped, and businesses that had once been used as fronts started operating smoothly again. Police and journalists began celebrating the apparent peace, calling it a turning point for Liverpool. But behind the scenes, the city had simply reorganized its crime under a single umbrella. The Albanians ran the top, the locals became the distributors. Every transaction, every deal, every pound still flowed upward into Irian's hand. Declan Hayes became the quiet middleman, profiting from both sides and maintaining the fragile balance with subtle manipulation. The illusion of stability spread across the city. Nightclubs reopened, the docks thrived again, and for the first time in years, Liverpool's streets seemed safe. But beneath that calm surface, fear never truly disappeared. Everyone understood that the peace existed only because the Albanians allowed it. The Blood Pact wasn't an alliance. It was submission disguised as partnership. The locals who once prided themselves on independence were now part of a larger system they couldn't escape. They worked, they earned, but they no longer ruled. For Irian Kodra, it was the perfect ending to years of bloodshed. He had achieved dominance without firing another bullet. Through control, wealth, and calculated diplomacy, he turned chaos into structure. To the public, Liverpool appeared reformed. To the underworld, it had simply become one of the most efficiently managed criminal cities in Britain. The Blood Pact marked not the end of war, but the birth of a new order, one where silence replaced violence, and every handshake carried the weight of fear.